Here it comes. The cold slap that makes most people angry. Getting rich is easy. If that phrase pisses you off, good, because it means you're still inside the same psychological cage that keeps most people broke. When Warren Buffett says those words, he's not being arrogant. He's not showing off. He's exposing a truth most people can't see. It's only hard to get rich when your brain is addicted to chaos. But once you retrain your mind, once you learn to delay gratification, master patience, and see time as your ally, wealth stops being a mystery. It becomes mechanical, predictable, even boring. But here's the catch. Most people hear getting rich is easy and immediately filter it through pain. Their debts, their failures, their missed chances. So they assume Buffett is either lucky, lying, or both. But the truth, he's revealing a cognitive distortion, a glitch in how our brains process simplicity. For someone whose nervous system has been conditioned for delayed rewards, wealth building really does feel easy. It's not a cheat code. It's neurological alignment. Write this down. The average person's brain is hijacked by dopamine. It's the invisible saboteur. Every scroll, every notification, every sugar hit, it's training your mind to expect instant pleasure. And when your brain gets wired for fast rewards, long-term thinking becomes painful. Investing too slow, discipline too hard, waiting torture, that's why most people can't build wealth. Not because they're lazy, but because they're chemically addicted to now. So how do you fix this? Micro rewards. Start conditioning your brain to crave the process instead of the payoff. Every time you say no to impulse and yes to strategy, reward yourself. Not with cake or Instagram, but with identity. Say out loud, this is who I am now. I delay, therefore I build. You're not chasing millions. You're rewiring a system, one repetition at a time. Let me tell you something most people don't know about Warren Buffett. He wasn't born patient. He trained for it. Over decades, he built a mental architecture where waiting became profitable, where not acting was the most powerful action. That's not personality, that's design. And one of his secret weapons? The principle of intermittent reinforcement. It's the same psychological loop that keeps gamblers addicted, but when you flip it, it becomes the foundation of elite patience. Sometimes your actions pay off, sometimes they don't, but you stay the course. Why? Because you've tied your identity to the path, not the prize. Let me explain. Intermittent reinforcement means your brain learns to keep going even when rewards are uncertain. You stop expecting instant feedback. You embrace the silence. You understand that wealth doesn't scream, it whispers, slowly, quietly, but only to those who can hear through the noise. So here's your first breakthrough. Getting rich is easy, but only after you rewire the operating system that keeps making it hard. It's not about learning more. It's about unlearning addiction. The addiction to now, the addiction to comfort, the addiction to speed. Warren Buffett's wealth isn't proof of genius, it's proof of nervous system mastery. Here's the paradox no one wants to admit. The people who say getting rich is easy have already walked through hell to get there. Not financial hell, emotional hell, identity hell. Because before wealth becomes simple, your nervous system has to be rebuilt from scratch, especially if you grew up in scarcity, especially if every dollar you touch came with fear, guilt, or shame. You think you're chasing money, but you're really trying to survive a war that started in your childhood, and no amount of hustle will fix that until you face it. You see, when Buffett says it's easy, he's not ignoring your struggle. He's describing what life feels like after you stop self-sabotaging. Most people aren't failing because they don't know what to do. They're failing because their internal thermostat is set to barely enough. So even when they start winning, they unconsciously pull back, overspend, overthink, overcompensate. Why? Because deep down they don't believe they deserve more. This is the invisible war, not against the economy, but against your own identity. And here's where the Galatea effect changes everything. It says your results always rise or fall to match your self-image. If you secretly believe you're only worth $2,000 a month, guess what? That's what you'll keep earning. Not because the market says so, but because your mind says so. You will block every opportunity that threatens to prove you wrong. That's not failure, that's programming. So, how do you reprogram? You don't need affirmations. You need precision. You need language that bypasses your defenses. Enter Milton. Erickson, the master of conversational hypnosis. He didn't convince people to change, he helped them change from the inside out. His secret? Speaking directly to the unconscious, using metaphors, repetition, and identity loops. You don't say, I am rich. You say, it's like something inside me always knew this was possible. You don't force new beliefs, you evoke them. Try this. Before you sleep, speak to yourself in the second person. You're learning to see money differently now. You're not chasing anymore. You're attracting because you're aligned. It's already happening. Keep going. It sounds simple, but simplicity is power. When it's consistent, you're not hypnotizing yourself to fake confidence. You're excavating buried identity. And what you find under the rubble is not a new version of you. It's the real one. The one that never needed to prove anything, just needed permission to emerge. Here's the real reason Warren Buffett became a billionaire. He never wanted to get rich fast. That's it. That's the whole secret. While everyone else was sprinting, panicking, jumping from scheme to scheme, Buffett was walking, slow, focused, unshaken. And that's exactly why he won, because in the wealth game, speed kills clarity. The moment you rush, you stop thinking. You stop choosing. You start reacting, and reaction is the enemy of wealth. Let's be clear, ambition is not the problem. The problem is compulsion. When your desire to be rich comes from fear, fear of missing out, fear of not being enough, fear of running out, your brain shuts down the part that thinks long term. That's neuroscience. The prefrontal cortex, your decision maker, gets overridden by survival mode. So even when you know what to do, you can't do it. Why? Because the emotional driver behind your ambition is actually panic, and panic makes expensive decisions. So how do you rewire that? You replace the addiction to speed with the architecture of patience. Let me give you a metaphor Buffett lives by, and even if he's never said it, the bamboo tree. You plant it, you water it, nothing happens. For a year, 2, 3, still nothing. But what you can't see is that beneath the soil, a massive root system is forming. And then, in year 5, it explodes upward, growing up to 90 feet in just 6 weeks. But here's the question. Was the bamboo growing during the 5 years you saw nothing? Or only in the 6 weeks it shot up? This is how wealth works. Quiet, underground, invisible, until suddenly it isn't. But most people never make it past year 1. They dig up the seed to see if it's working. They quit before the roots are in place. Why? Because they don't trust time. They've never seen time as a friend, only as a threat. But Buffett, he treats time like a business partner. He feeds it discipline, and time pays him back with compound results. And this is what you must build. A mind that keeps planting even when you can't see the growth. You don't need results to believe. You believe so the results appear. That's not magic. That's identity. That's alignment. That's how legacies are built. Not in a sprint, but in a system. Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. You don't want to be rich. You want to stop being afraid. You want to wake up without the panic. You want to breathe without that silent pressure in your chest. That constant fear of not having enough, of losing control, of being behind. And because no one ever taught you how to regulate that fear, you chase money like it's medicine. But money is not medicine. It's a magnifier. And if you bring fear into fortune, you won't feel free. You'll feel trapped inside a bigger, shinier prison. Most people aren't building wealth. They're building protection. Protection from childhood wounds, from scarcity trauma, from the terror of feeling powerless. And that's why their financial strategies collapse. Not because they're wrong on paper, but because they're built on panic. You don't need another tactic. You need to calm your system, because a dysregulated nervous system can't make clear decisions. Write this down. Clarity is a body state, not a mental concept. You can't think your way into calm. You have to feel it. Embodiment practices, breathwork, grounding, slow movement, aren't spiritual fluff. They're financial armor. When your body is calm, your brain reactivates its decision-making center. You can see long-term. You can tolerate uncertainty. You can delay gratification, not out of discipline, but because it no longer feels threatening. You don't need to meditate under a tree. Do what Buffett does, meditate with numbers. He doesn't need mantras. His spreadsheet is his sanctuary. His projections are his breath. When he looks at data, he's not chasing, he's observing. No emotion, no noise, just patterns, time, and trust. That's not detachment. That's emotional regulation through logic. Start here. Open your numbers. Look at them without flinching. No judgment, just observation. This is where I am. This is where I'm going. And every choice I make is a signal to my nervous system that I'm in control now. Not the fear, not the past. Me. So here's the real breakthrough. You think you're chasing wealth, but wealth is just the mask. What you're really seeking is safety, inner safety. And once you learn how to create that without needing the money first, the money finally comes, because you're no longer repelling it with fear. This is where the trap tightens. When someone says, getting rich is easy, and your life feels like a storm of failure, your brain doesn't just disagree, it attacks itself. That's the danger of the easy narrative. If you're struggling, broke, or just stuck, that message doesn't inspire. It shames. It whispers, if it's so easy, why haven't you done it yet? And that question doesn't lead to growth, it leads to paralysis. Shame is the most toxic emotion in the wealth journey, not because it's loud, but because it's silent. It hides in your self-talk, in your reluctance to try again, in your avoidance of spreadsheets, goals, and numbers. Because deep down, shame convinces you that your failures aren't mistakes. They're reflections of your worth. And when that belief takes root, your brain stops learning. It stops risking. It just survives. Here's the solution. Use the shame. Transform it. Leverage it. You do that with a tool called cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort you feel when your actions don't match your identity. Most people experience dissonance and retreat, but the wealthy use it to evolve. They let that tension force them to choose, change the action, or upgrade the identity. That's your moment of power. So instead of saying, I'm failing, say this, I'm in between identities. That's not denial. That's framing. You're not behind. You're rebuilding. And here's the truth. The fact that you're starting over isn't a curse. It's a superpower. Most people are too deep into bad decisions to change. You've got nothing to protect. No ego to defend. No fake life to maintain. That's freedom. That's leverage. When you hit financial zero, you're not empty. You're clear. You can finally move with truth. No more pretending. No more performing. Just raw potential. That's where Buffett started. That's where every titan starts. Not with certainty, but with the humility to start again, smarter. So here's the frame. You're not late, you're clean. And that means everything is possible. Shame has no power over someone who decides to begin again, with eyes open, heart steady, and mind sharp. This might sting a little. Warren Buffett uses compound interest. You use compound anxiety. Every time you panic, hesitate, or abandon your plan, you're not just losing money, you're building a momentum of fear. Just like interest compounds wealth, emotion compounds behavior. And over time, that emotional interest becomes a debt. Not on your credit card, on your potential. Here's what nobody teaches. Your brain doesn't measure time logically. It measures emotionally. That's why a week of uncertainty feels like a year. That's why waiting 3 years for success feels like a lifetime, but wasting 10 years feels normal. Because time isn't what's on your calendar, it's what's in your body. And unless you learn to regulate that emotional clock, you'll keep quitting too early. You'll keep starting over, mistaking motion for progress, and wonder why nothing compounds. Buffett knows time is his weapon. He doesn't need to outperform everyone. He just needs to outweight them. And while the world tries to double their money in 6 months, he doubles his in silence, over decades. But it's not just patience, it's vision. He sees what most people never stop to imagine. The power of small actions repeated over time. Here's your exercise. Take 15 minutes. Open a blank page. At the top, write, what happens if I repeat my best financial habit every week for 10 years? Doesn't matter if it's saving $50, learning for 1 hour, or saying no to impulse buys. Multiply it out, add it up, visualize the result. Then ask, how would I behave today if I believed this vision was guaranteed? You're not trying to predict the future. You're training your brain to fall in love with direction over outcome. Because when you have direction, you don't need dopamine spikes. You don't need urgency. You just show up because it's who you are now. This is the hidden math of wealth, small, boring, repeated. But here's the twist. When done with identity, it stops feeling boring. It feels powerful, intentional, certain. Here's the truth that hits hardest at the top. Money doesn't change your life. It changes how you see yourself. That's it. That's the final unlock. Because once the bills are paid, once the pressure fades, you're left with the only question that ever mattered. Who am I when I don't have to chase anymore? And for most people, the answer is terrifying, because they never built a self beyond survival. Warren Buffett doesn't buy sports cars, he doesn't flex on Instagram, he still lives in the same house he bought in 1958. Why? Because for him, money isn't about image, it's about freedom of focus. He buys the luxury of ignoring everything that doesn't matter. That's what wealth really is. Not consumption, but clarity. Not showing off, but choosing what stays in your life. And that leads to the most powerful shift of all, identity redefinition. The moment you stop chasing wealth to prove something and start creating wealth as an extension of who you are, everything changes. You don't need to outperform. You need to align. And alignment is quiet, precise, permanent. Here's the final tool, reverse visualization. Most people visualize success. Try this instead. Visualize total failure. Not to scare yourself, but to strip away the noise. Imagine losing everything. Imagine the regret, the pain. Now ask, what would have made it worth it? You'll notice something. It's never the money. It's the impact, the love, the growth, the self-respect. That's your real goal. And once you lock into that, wealth becomes simple, because you're no longer confused about what it's for. So here's your closing truth. Success isn't about luck. It's about alignment. And getting rich, it is easy, but only for the person who's done the invisible work. The inner rewiring, the emotional rewiring, the identity rewiring. You don't need to get rich to become someone.